Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most complex and tragic conflicts in the Middle East, the Lebanese Civil War, which raged from 1975 to 1990. This war, unlike many others, wasn't a simple battle between two sides. It was a multi-factional conflict involving various religious and political groups, regional powers, and international interests. The war tore Lebanon apart, left deep scars in the country's social fabric, and shaped the region for decades. So, let's break it down. How did Lebanon, a country known for its rich history, vibrant culture, and cosmopolitan cities, descend into civil war? What were the causes, the key events, and the impact of this conflict? Let's get started. Before the war, Lebanon was a unique and prosperous country in the Middle East. Lebanon's capital, Beirut, was often referred to as the Paris of the Middle East due to its cosmopolitan atmosphere, modern infrastructure, and thriving cultural scene. Lebanon had a diverse population made up of various religious and ethnic groups, including Christians, Maronite Catholics, Greek Orthodox, and others, Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, and Druze. This diversity was reflected in the political system, which was designed to ensure that all religious communities had a stake in the government. The National Pact, an informal agreement reached in 1943, created a delicate balance of power between Lebanon's major religious communities. Under this pact, the president was always a Maronite Christian, the prime minister was a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament was a Shia Muslim. This arrangement helped maintain political stability for decades, but also created tensions between different groups as the demographic landscape of Lebanon began to change. By the 1970s, Lebanon's population had shifted significantly, with Muslims becoming the majority. However, the political system remained rooted in the old confessional structure, which was increasingly viewed as outdated and unfair. This growing disparity between the demographic reality and the political system set the stage for instability. The Lebanese Civil War didn't have a single cause, but there were several key factors that ignited the conflict. One of the most significant flashpoints was the growing political and sectarian tensions between the country's Christian and Muslim communities. These tensions were exacerbated by the influx of Palestinian refugees and the presence of the Palestine Liberation Organization PLO in Lebanon. During the 1970s, after the Palestinians were expelled from Jordan, they sought refuge in Lebanon, and the PLO set up bases there, especially in the southern parts of the country. The PLO's activities, including cross-border raids into Israel, made them a target for Israel and a source of conflict within Lebanon. Lebanese Christians, who were increasingly wary of the PLO's growing influence, saw them as a threat to Lebanon's sovereignty and stability. The conflict came to a head in April 1975 when a Christian militia ambushed a bus full of Palestinian civilians in the town of Ain el-Rumayna. This attack, known as the Ain el-Rumayna massacre, sparked violent retaliation from Palestinian militias, and within weeks, Lebanon was engulfed in full-scale civil war. The Lebanese Civil War was not a simple conflict between two sides, it was a multi-factional war with various militias and groups involved, each with its own agenda and backing. The major factions in the war were: the Phalange Party, led by Pierre Gemayel, was a right-wing Christian militia that represented the interests of Lebanon's Maronite Christian community. They were one of the primary opponents of the growing influence of Muslims and Palestinians in Lebanon. The Phalange were initially supported by Israel, which viewed them as allies in the fight against Palestinian militias. The PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, was a key player in the conflict. The PLO operated out of Lebanon, using the country as a base for its operations against Israel. The PLO's presence in Lebanon made them a target for Christian militias, who accused them of destabilizing Lebanon and threatening its sovereignty. The LNM was a coalition of Muslim and leftist groups, including the Druze militia led by Walid Jumblat and the Communist Party. This group supported the Palestinians and advocated for a secular, left-wing government. They opposed the Christian-dominated political system and called for reforms to allow for more representation for Muslims. The Amal movement was a Shia militia led by Imad Mughniya and supported by Syria. While initially part of the broader Lebanese national movement, Amal would eventually become one of the major Shia factions in Lebanon. Amal was aligned with Syria, which had its own interests in Lebanon, especially regarding the Shia community. In the 1980s, the rise of Hezbollah, a Shia militant group, further complicated the conflict. Hezbollah was supported by Iran and became one of the most powerful forces in Lebanon, particularly in the southern regions. They fought against Israel and the Christian militias, and over time became a key player in Lebanon's politics. The external powers Israel and Syria played significant roles in the war. Israel intervened in Lebanon multiple times, particularly after the 1978 and 1982 Israeli invasions, in an effort to weaken the PLO and establish a friendly government in Lebanon. Syria, on the other hand, entered Lebanon in 1976 to intervene in the war and establish its influence. By the mid-1980s, Syria controlled much of the country, especially the western and central regions, and its involvement in Lebanese politics deepened. The civil war was characterized by shifting alliances, brutal battles, and the involvement of foreign powers. In the early years of the war, the fighting was primarily between Christian militias and Palestinian groups. By 1976, Syria sent troops into Lebanon to prevent the Christians from being completely defeated. This intervention marked the start of Syria's long-term involvement in Lebanon's internal politics. In 1982, the conflict took a dramatic turn when Israel invaded Lebanon in an effort to expel the PLO from the country and eliminate the threat posed by Palestinian militants. The Israeli invasion led to the eventual withdrawal of the PLO from Lebanon and the establishment of a temporary Israeli-controlled zone in southern Lebanon. The invasion also paved the way for the rise of Hezbollah, which became a powerful force in southern Lebanon, especially in its battle against Israeli occupation. Throughout the war, alliances were fluid. Sometimes Christian factions fought alongside Muslims, and other times the alliances shifted depending on the changing interests of external powers. One of the most tragic events during this period was the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982, where Christian Phalange militia members, with Israeli complicity, massacred Palestinian refugees in Beirut. This event remains one of the darkest moments of the war. By the late 1980s, Lebanon had been ravaged by years of fighting, and the war seemed endless. Thousands of civilians had been killed, entire neighborhoods in Beirut were destroyed, and the economy was in ruins. International pressure, particularly from Arab countries, led to negotiations. In 1989, the Taif Agreement was signed in Saudi Arabia, marking a turning point in the conflict. The agreement called for the disarmament of militias, the establishment of a new political structure, and the withdrawal of foreign forces, including Syria. While it did not bring immediate peace, the Taif Agreement laid the groundwork for the eventual end of the war. By 1990, the fighting had largely subsided, and the Lebanese militias, with the support of Syria, gradually moved towards peace. The disbandment of militias and the eventual return to stability was a long and difficult process, but it was clear that Lebanon was no longer a battleground between sectarian groups. The Lebanese civil war left a profound legacy on the country. The war caused an estimated 120,000 deaths and left hundreds of thousands more wounded or displaced. Beirut, once a thriving metropolis, was reduced to rubble. The war also deepened Lebanon's sectarian divisions, and even though the Taif Agreement helped restore a measure of peace, sectarian tensions have remained a defining feature of Lebanese politics to this day. Syria's influence in Lebanon lasted for decades after the war, until the Cedar Revolution in 2005, which forced Syria to withdraw its forces. Hezbollah, meanwhile, remains one of the most powerful political and military groups in Lebanon and continues to have a significant impact on the country's politics. The Lebanese Civil War was a deeply complex and tragic conflict that reshaped Lebanon and the wider Middle East. It was a war driven by religious and political divisions, external interventions, and shifting alliances. Lebanon's road to recovery has been long, and while it has made significant progress in rebuilding, the scars of the Civil War remain deeply embedded in the country's psyche. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more history content. And as always, feel free to leave any thoughts or questions in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspectives on the Lebanese Civil War and its lasting impact. See you in the next video.